Good morning. Welcome to Cedars Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Tyler Weaver, and I'm acting as your worship associate today, along with our minister, Zachary Vinson, our music director, Chris Smello, and our faith formation lead, Catherine J. Before we start, let's pause to acknowledge that members of our congregation occupy the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Coast Salish tribes. The homelands of the Suquamish, Duwamish, Clallam, and Chimicum people were ceded under duress through the Point Elliott and Point No Point treaties. We are grateful guests on these lands and affirm indigenous sovereignty, both past and present. The acknowledgement does not substitute for the need to build authentic relationships with modern-day members of these tribes and to learn about their living culture and history. Our faith community is sustained by the generosity of our members. Your contribution will nourish the spiritual growth of our community through weekly worship, with ongoing programs that cultivate connection, belonging, sharing, and caring. Included in the video description and displayed on the screen below is information to make a contribution to Cedars through our PayPal account. Please take the time either now or later in the service to make a contribution to help sustain Cedars. Your gifts are greatly appreciated. Cedars is committed to being a welcoming and inclusive community. In all the beauty of languages, cultures, and skin tones that come together in your uniqueness, we welcome you. In all the ways you experience and express gender, we welcome you. In the beauty of who you love and how you love, we welcome you. With all the religious and ethical traditions that inform your spiritual life, we welcome you. Whether you come feeling whole, feeling broken, or somewhere in between, we welcome you. No matter how long you've been away or how soon you will return, we welcome you. You're invited to join us with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. We welcome you today and always. When I was asked to work as the worship associate for this service, at first I was excited. I hadn't done this for a few years, and I've kind of missed doing it. And then I realized I was going to have the somewhat daunting task of having to talk about authenticity and being authentic in front of a camera lens, pretending I'm talking to an audience. How carefully have I chosen the lighting and the background for this clip? How many times will I reshoot this to clean up the mistakes I inevitably make and have already made, when if I was delivering this in person, I would just have to roll with it and see where things went. This is actually the second time I've shot this. The first time I was not in focus. So hopefully I'm in focus and we can go. And I will try to do this with all the warts intact. I think there's never been, at least in my lifetime, a greater opportunity or a greater temptation to present a fictionalized version of ourselves to the world. Think about your social media. Think about what you post on social media and what your friends post on social media. Most often it's a curated image of ourselves, not our complete selves, but simply a profile that we've chosen to represent us. I rarely post on social media, but when I do, you're not going to see the ugly pictures of me. My least proud moments as a parent, my deepest fears, what made me cry a few days ago or a month ago, my mistakes and misstatements or the jokes I told that didn't work. You're not going to see the complete me. You're going to see what I choose to show you. And I know I'm not alone, and this is a growing dynamic in our society. For the last 4 years, we've had a president who has a true talent for making truth a relative concept. I don't like him at all. But I have to admit, he's done a very good job of making us question what is true and what is authentic. What we know about our country, what we know about our fellow citizens, and what we know and believe about institutions that we've taken for granted for so many years. Maybe I just never saw the cracks in America's foundation, or maybe this is just a mirage he's created. It's kind of hard to keep the fakery and the authentic straight these days. And the pandemic has only heightened the authenticity crisis. When we're out in public these days, we actually wear masks. And I'm not against that. I think that they're absolute necessity for protecting ourselves and others. But just consider what a radical change that is for our society. A year ago, if you'd worn a mask, you were either a germaphobe or you were somebody who's trying to hide your identity. These days, if I see somebody I know, or I think I know, I usually have to do a triple check to make sure that's the person behind the mask. And if I've missed you because I didn't recognize you with your mask on recently, I apologize. But with very few exceptions, I don't get to see people up close, at least not their whole face. I can't see their smiles or their frowns, and if they're not talking, I can't tell if they're angry or sad or elated, and I suppose they can't tell that about me either. And aside from my closest family, the only people I see without masks any longer are people I see through a camera, with a careful background and clothing chosen for whatever the occasion is. Sometimes they even use a fake background. There's somebody I'm with in regular meetings with who always uses a Disneyland castle as her background. I, cleaned some stuff off this wall before I shot this. There's stuff on the floor I just dropped there that you can't see, but that's the whole point, right? Anyway, I don't want to belabor the point, but it's never been easier or more in vogue to hide who you really are. And that's a real shame. There's a power in being authentic, and being comfortable enough with yourself that you're not afraid to show your quirks to the world. That doesn't mean you have to zoom from the darkest, dankest, dirtiest corner of your garage, or post on Facebook about, how you lost your temper last night over something stupid. But it's important to embrace yourselves and your beliefs and to share that with others. If there's one certainty in this world, it's that none of us are perfect. So let's stop pretending that we are. Try to be brave enough to let us see your vulnerabilities, because that's what makes you who you are, and we love you for it. And so today, I dedicate the lighting my chalice to being the truest and therefore best version of yourself that you can be. Thank you.
As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat all people kindly, because they are our brothers and sisters, to take good care of the earth, because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness, because that is how we will all become the best that we can be.
I know this rose will open. I know my fear will burn away. I know my soul will unfurl its wings. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open. I know this rose will open.
Hey everyone, it's Reverend Zachary. And before we jump into our service topic of the day, the search for authenticity, I just wanted to take a moment and let you all know that I'm thinking of you. Uh, the next few weeks, the rest of this calendar year, are going to get very hard for us again. I'm sure many of you have heard about the new COVID-19 restrictions that are going to be going into effect on Monday that will again limit our ability to go out into public places. Working is limited to essential businesses only again. And so we're going to be home a lot again. And just be gentle with yourself. Do the things that you need to do to make sure that you stay safe and sane and healthy, you and your family. And know that despite the physical distance that is between us during this time, we've proven time and time again over the last several months that through technology, we can continue to stay in meaningful connection and community. And so if you find yourself in a hard time, please reach out. Reach out to me. Reach out to a member of your pastoral care, of the pastoral care team, or really anyone else in the church. You're not alone, and despite isolation that we may feel, we can still find ways to be together and connected. The second thing I want to just mention is uh, this next week, I'm going to be taking a few days off. And mostly this is so I can take care of myself. I also need to spend a little bit of time doing some reading and research so I can begin preparing for our worship and other programming that's going to happen after the first of the year when we enter 2021. And so from Wednesday through the weekend, I will be off. This corresponds with my usual weekend off. Next Sunday, our service leader will be Barry Andrews. And so we're excited to have Barry share his message with all of you. And I look forward to coming back refreshed and ready to continue doing the important work that Cedars is called to. So our topic for this service is the search for authenticity. And the topic of authenticity is honestly one of my favorite things to spend personal time exploring. This idea of having a correlation between who we feel we truly are inside of ourselves, in the deepest core of our being, and how we move through the world and how other people experience us. And that authenticity is about bringing that internal and external uh, reality in line with each other in a way that allows us to sort of be, naturally who we are. Whether that's just because of the nurture that we've experienced that have ingrained certain things, or because that is who we were created and made to be, as some people believe. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And I think that this is a really important topic as we continue growing into an understanding of what it means to practice what we preach here at Cedars and also within our own lives, to move in a way that really exemplifies those deeply held things that we believe. So, before we get into the rest of our service, I want you to just take a moment and consider these questions. Who is it that I am? In the deepest sort of recesses of my beings, in the heart and essence of me as an individual. Who am I? Who am I? Next, what are those things that I believe so deeply that they feel just essential to my worldview? What are the values that I feel exist in my core, and when those values are violated, I get a little bit out of sorts? What are those essential values? And then with those two questions, who you are, what are your essential values? Next, I want you to think about what it is that you feel you are called to. In what ways can you take those internal things, that essence of who you are, and bring it out into the world to answer that calling toward fulfillment? So who are you? What do you believe? And what are you being called to? These are the questions we hope to begin exploring together as we come together to worship.
Hello, friends. I want to tell you a story this morning based on something you may have heard before, something you've probably been encouraged to do, which is march to the beat of your own drum. So when people tell you to march to the beat of your own drum, or that person really marches to the beat of their own drum, usually what we're talking about is people are being authentic. They've thought about what they believe and how they are and how they move through the world, and they are going to ignore social pressures and just march to the beat of their own drum. Now, the story I want to tell you today is about a town that began to take that saying literally. No one's sure when it first happened, but one person thought, march to the beat of my own drum. I'm going to really do that. And he started walking around, marching to the beat of his own drum. And his town, the people who lived in his town thought, hey, that's awesome. He is really marching to the beat of his own drum. And somebody else said, I'm going to do that too. And they went out and they got a drum and they found their own beat. And gradually, over time, nobody remembers exactly when it happened, everyone in town had their own beat. Now, everyone in town had their own beat. So you might imagine on a Saturday afternoon when people were out shopping, things could get really loud. But everybody was happy. Everybody was marching to the beat of their own drum. Now, in this town, which is called Drumville, one year, a little boy named Jonah was born. Jonah's moms were so excited, and they gave him the same thing that all the babies in town got, a tiny little drum to practice on. Now, it wasn't assumed that people immediately came out and knew which beat they wanted, so kids had some time to practice, and Jonah, like his friends, practiced some basic beats. But Jonah always felt kind of different from the other kids because Jonah felt like he didn't really have any rhythm. There wasn't a beat that really called to him. All of his friends were practicing and trying out new beats and trying out new sounds and trying out different kinds of drums. Somebody even picked the bongos. But Jonah really felt kind of left out. He didn't really feel like he belonged. He didn't feel authentic in playing the drum. But that's what everyone did. And so Jonah decided, well, okay, I got to figure out a drum beat for me. And so he kept practicing. He kept picking different ones. No, that wasn't quite it either.
But, you know, this town was so focused and was so sure that everyone was going to find a drum beat to call their own, to be authentically theirs, that instead of coming of age ceremonies or bar mitzvahs or bat mitzvahs, when kids turned 13, they went on a drum quest. And they went out on their own. They found a place with their drum and their drumsticks, and they listened for the beat inside of them. They listened for their own authentic beat. Jonah took his drum and his drumsticks, but he needed to get away. And so Jonah walked to the outskirts of town, and he found a forest, a quiet, quiet forest. All of the drum sounds faded into the distance, and he couldn't hear them anymore. Everything around him in the forest was quiet. And he sat down with his drum, and he listened. He listened, and he breathed in the silence. And as he sat there, he began to realize that it wasn't silent at all. There were all kinds of noises around him. He could hear the burbling of the brook, and he could hear the wind through the trees. He could hear the sound of the birds, lots of different bird sounds. He listened, and he listened, and he could feel himself opening up. He could feel himself finding his own way. And Jonah put down his drum. He left it in the forest, friends, and he decided to walk home with his new authentic sound in his head. So Jonah went home. He was a little nervous because he had left his drum in the forest. And he came home and his mom said, "Jonah, what's your beat?" And he said, "Mom, I have something to tell you. I don't have any rhythm. I don't have a beat. I don't even like the drum." His moms were a little shocked. But you know, when you live in a town where you're encouraged to march to the beat of your own drum, you're pretty open-minded. And so his mom said, "Okay, Jonah, what did you discover on your drum quest?" And Jonah said, "I discovered I like melody. I don't like rhythm. And I want to play you the sound that came to me in the forest." Jonah took out a set of bells and he began to play. He said, "That is my authentic sound. I'm not marching to the beat of my own drum. I'm marching to the melody of my own sound." And his moms hugged him and they said, "We love you so much. You're going to add some great noise to our community. Welcome, welcome, welcome." And that's my story.
Please join me in a moment of prayerful reflection and meditation with these words by my colleague, Reverend Nate Walker, in which he encourages us to be each other's personal spiritual trainer. When you come to me, come not with the expectation to have some passive clergy person coddle you into complacency. No, come to me as your PST, your personal spiritual trainer. I'm serious. I want to see you move. I want to see you root yourself in a community built upon moral complexity and to hold each other to the ethic of intellectual honesty. I want to see you move beyond your religious hang-ups of your broken past and use your regenerative spirit to seize the day. I want to see you flex your moral muscles. I want to see you exercise spiritual practices to the point of training your mind and body and spirit to collaborate as a single, integrated, and dynamic entity. I want to hear you articulate your beliefs. I want to hear you articulate your faith to the point of having some moral relevance. I want to know that you are engaged in the moral issues of our time. I want to know what makes you afraid. I want to know if you are cultivating your doubts and your questions so that when you do take a stand, we can all trust in your authenticity. I want to know the intricacies of how you are treating other people. Have you learned new ways to better your relationships? If so, then share them. I want to know if you have learned to like yourself. Have you learned to love yourself? I want to know if you feel alive. I want to know if you feel like you belong, like you feel like you matter. Because to me, you do. You do, because you all are my personal spiritual trainers. May it be so. Amen.
Hello, everyone. Chris Mello, music director at Cedars here. Today, I would like to share one of my piano pieces with you. I call this one Remembering Summer 2020. As I'm sure is true for most of you, my summer plans totally collapsed this year. No UU music conference, no trip to the East Coast to see my family, and no camping trips. Day trips replaced camping trips, and time spent in my garden instead of traveling resulted in an amazing abundance of flowers, fruits, and vegetables. Usually choir disbands for the summer, but because I was home and missed everybody, I continued meeting virtually with the choir every Wednesday night through the summer. Choir meetings were a delightful way to connect, even if they sometimes got a little goofy as we all adjusted to Zoom. So, in the midst of horrific happenings in our nation and the world, summer of 2020 held many moments of pure joy for me, and I'm happy to share them with you here.
I mentioned earlier that today we are exploring the topic of authenticity. What does it mean to truly be who we feel we are meant to be? So, as we continue exploring this topic, I thought I would take a moment to share a story with all of you. The year before I moved down to California to start seminary, I lived in Bellingham where I worked at the REI store there. So lots of outdoor equipment, recreational equipment. When I was hired at this store, the job I was hired for was that of a coat salesperson. And to be honest, it didn't take me long to realize that I am really not a salesperson. I don't enjoy one bit trying to get people to buy things that they might not even need or want. It's not something I find comfortable, it's awkward. And to be honest, I oftentimes felt like I was convincing people of things that weren't necessarily authentic or true to them. To give you an idea of this, when someone came into my department, I was supposed to greet them and ask them what they came in for. Because they were oftentimes in the coat department, the answer was a jacket, a coat, a sweater, some sort of outerwear that you would use for sporting and recreational things. Once the person told me what it is that they came in for that day, I would walk with them over to the appropriate racks, and we would start looking through the racks. And I would ask questions, open-ended questions that got beyond just simple yes or no answers. Instead of asking, do you need a coat, which was obvious by their presence, I would ask them, what are you going to use this coat for? When are you going to wear it? From there, I would begin to work with the customer to narrow down some options until we had three different options. At this point, I'd walk through some of the technical specifications of each of these jackets, whether or not it was waterproof, how breathable it was, range of motion, all of those technical things that you would look for when buying a jacket for a specific reason. And once we went through these various specifications, I would work to narrow down the selection from 3 to just 1. At this point, oftentimes the customer would be satisfied with their choice or with the choice presented to them, thank you, and head off to the register or another department in the store. However, when someone seemed like that they were still on the fence and they may not necessarily buy the jacket, there was a certain technique that we were encouraged to use. You'd ask the customer to try the jacket on. And again, ask them what they plan to use this coat for. The answers ranged from skiing to dog walking. But to be honest, the answer in this situation as a salesperson was irrelevant. We had already identified the jacket the person wanted at the beginning of the engagement, when they said what they wanted to wear the jacket for. But instead, this step of having them try on the jacket was more about getting into the customer's head. Once they said the coat was for dog walking, for instance, you might ask them while wearing the jacket to close their eyes and imagine themselves out walking their dog wearing this jacket. Once they close their eyes, you'd say, think of how you feel walking your dog. Are you comfortable? Can you move freely? Is this the right jacket for you? All the questions that we were supposed to ask the customers in these situations used forms of positive reinforcement. Is the jacket right for you? Instead of, is the jacket comfortable or uncomfortable? Can you move freely instead of, are there places you feel constricted? Each of the ways that these questions was formulated was designed to elicit sort of positive reactions. And while you're doing this, you're asking the customer to imagine themselves doing the activity, oftentimes an activity they enjoyed. This part of the interaction is what made me uncomfortable, and also to realize that I'm not a salesman. It felt manipulative to me. I say this because in the training for this job, not only was I taught about the technical specifications of the product I was selling, but I was also taught how to have these conversations. We practiced it. We would practice among ourselves in the morning before the store opened to hone this way of selling things, of convincing people that this was the jacket for them. There's a reason we'd ask the customer to imagine themselves walking their dog. In most cases, this did work. And in the few times it didn't, that's bound to happen, we'd move on. But in the times where it did work, we'd take it to the next step. So you're buying a new jacket. Well, you need special soap to wash this jacket in that's designed specifically for this material. Let me walk you over to that section. Well, now that you have the soap, are you a member of REI? Oh, you're not. Let's sign you up for a membership. Each step of the way, once they've agreed to buy the jacket, sort of draws upon that false sense of positivity that you helped to create in that situation. These interactions felt really authentic to who I am. I went home and often felt like I don't want to convince people they need a jacket. I hate it when people try to convince me of things in a way that isn't really true to what I want. It feels kind of dirty. At the same time in my life, I was also fairly active in the Bellingham Unitarian Fellowship. And the difference between these two places, these two systems that I engaged with, was that while at REI, this role of salesperson made me feel like I wasn't true to myself, my volunteer work and engagement in the Bellingham Church made me feel as if something inside of me was coming out into the world in a way that was true to who I am. That I got to be part of something that was important and meaningful to me. Very different being at church than being at work. So that's a bit about my experience of a time when I felt that what I was doing was inauthentic, and how that maybe caused me to realize what I'm currently doing, my work as a minister, helps me feel a little bit more authentic. Not to say that there's not moments that we try on personas or do things we don't necessarily enjoy, but being in the role of minister, being your minister, has a way of making me feel as if how I'm moving through the world is true to who I am. We've used this word authentic, authenticity a lot in this message, but if we stop and think about it, what does this word really mean? What does it mean to be authentic? According to one definition, authenticity is defined as being true to one's own perspective, spirit, or character. In a sense, authenticity is about matching how we move through the world with our sense of who we are in our innermost self. This understanding of authenticity has existed and been the pursuit of religious communities for a long time now. In the ruins of the Temple of Apollo at Delphi, there are stones that can be found with the phrase, "Know thyself," scribed across them. These stones were believed to have been situated above the temple's main entrance as a reminder of all those who come in to search out within themselves, to know themselves. Beyond this, in the Gospel of Thomas, one of the texts found among the Dead Sea Scroll, there is a quote included in the sayings of Jesus that says, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." This idea of bringing out one's true self, bringing it out into the world, is not new. It's something that people have sought after throughout all of our human history. It's something that we continue to try to find and live into in our own work here at Cedars or in our own lives as individuals. But why? Why is authenticity important? Why is it that having that relationship between our internal world and our external world is so important? Important to us and our sense of fulfillment, important to our relationships and our ability to place trust in one another. As I was preparing for this sermon, I spent some time thinking about why authenticity is important. And as with most things, when my curiosity set in, I turned toward the internet. Reading articles and watching TED Talks, I began to notice a thread that many people named in relation to the concept of authenticity. This thread is something that I found also to run through my own experience of seeking authenticity. Authentic people feel fulfilled. From authenticity comes a sense of one-to-one correlation between our internal and external life. When we live authentically, we feel as if we are living out some sort of innate purpose, a feeling that we are doing the thing that we were created to do, that we are fulfilling a sense of what it is we were created for in this world, or the circumstances that caused us to be to fulfill. That when we are authentic, when we have that relationship, we find that we are fulfilled. Perhaps it's this feeling that has caused us to seek this sense of authenticity throughout time, to know ourselves and bring that which is within us out into the world. We are happiest when we are true to ourselves and to each other. With that said, I wonder, how is it that we can live more authentic lives? How is it that we can together live in a way that causes us to feel that deep sense of fulfillment, that we are doing that thing that we are meant to do? In my research, one of the keys that I found to living authentically is to know what you want. I think that's an important starting point. It's an expression that is caught up in the maxim of know thyself. Where is your heart calling you? What dreams or purpose lie at the center of your being? The world often imposes roles upon us, making us coat salespeople instead of ministers. The reality of financial and social pressures often shape us into forms that don't match our internal desires 100%. Other times, we never stop to ask what it is we truly want out of life, and instead find ourselves caught in a capricious current that buffets us along, and unknowing and unaware, we drift through life. But when we take the time to know ourselves and bring what is within us out into the world, we gain the capacity to navigate through these currents. That doesn't mean we might not occasionally sell coats to get by. But when we know what we want, we learn to see these things as necessities of the world, not necessities of the world, not essential characteristics of who we are. We take on things to survive, we act in ways, but those aren't necessarily essential to who we are, to our true identity. Another marker of authenticity is our ability to practice what we preach. I mentioned how for me authenticity is about bringing about a one-to-one correlation between our internal and external lives. This means that the things that we think and believe need to align with our words and actions. Those things that are within us need to come out in a way that shows we truly believe them. That is authenticity. I think this point about practicing what we preach is especially important for us here as a faith community. I mean, you literally hear me preach. I literally share a message with all of you in hopes of bringing us in line with our values. In our call to worship earlier, I asked you to consider, who it is that you are, what those deeply held values that you have are. And based on those two questions, where are you being called to in the world? The truth is, people know when you're being inauthentic. Despite having some success as a coat salesman, I think most people knew I wasn't super into it. I'd push the questions, I would move the conversation along so that way I could sell a coat. It wasn't something I enjoyed. I wasn't practicing what I deeply believed in my core. It didn't feel natural for me. And I think knowing that there was that disconnect between my internal and external life caused me to feel frustrated. And I think that this is a feeling I get as an individual. I also believe it's something that as a community, as a system, as a convergence of relationships at Cedars, we can feel that same frustration when we say one thing and do another. It creates a contradiction that makes us inauthentic. It makes it so we don't fulfill those things that we say we want to, that we don't feel fulfilled in the work that we are doing. And that is why I think it is so important that we take the time and ask ourselves, what is it that we really want? What do we want from life? What do we want from community? What do we want to be remembered for, and what meaning do we want to make? Together as a community, how we answer and wrestle with these questions is going to determine how fulfilled that we can be, how meaningful our impact will be, how true to our purpose, our mission, and vision we are. Sometimes I'll be honest, as your minister, I still feel at a bit of a disadvantage when it comes to thinking about what it means to be authentic here at Cedars. I haven't known you all that long. I've been here a little over a year. A good chunk of that time has been spent in these virtual spaces where, despite interacting and getting some meaningful connection in places, I don't have the chance to be with you in a way that allows me to know what it is this community truly wants. And that's hard because I want us to live authentically into our purpose, into the reason we are in this world, why this congregation was organized. And not getting the time always that I feel would allow me to get to know what's inside of us that needs to come out. It's difficult. But all difficulty aside, I do believe taking the time in our individual and collective ways to think about that question of what we want, where we want to go, what our values are, and what we're being called to. Responding to these questions, asking these questions, is going to be key in us coming to a fuller understanding of what it means for us to be authentically Cedars. Where and how we will get that deep and abiding sense of fulfillment as individuals and a community. May we continue to wrestle with all of this, and in the midst of that wrestling, uncover what it is that we are truly called to, the purpose that is ours, and perhaps ours alone, to fulfill in the world, to the glory of life.
We would be one as now we join in singing our hymn of love to pledge ourselves anew to that high cause of greater understanding of who we are and what in us is true. We would be one in living for each other to show to all a new community. We would be one in building for tomorrow a nobler world than we have known today. We would be one in searching for that meaning which binds our hearts and points us on our way. As one we pledge ourselves to greater service. With love and justice strive to make us free.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our service this day has ended, but our service to one another and the world begins anew. May we go forth in confidence and continue to cultivate our doubts and questions with the hope of finding what it is that allows us to be more authentically ourselves. May it be so. Amen.